like to share that my specialty area is modern slavery in complex supply chains. So it's a bit of a different angle than what many people focus on. I focus specifically when there are workforces that either are indentured, bonded, forced, coerced, deceived in some way, and frequently they're forced to sometimes work for as long as 2 years without any pay, and then they're brought to different places by brokers and by agencies, who again either deceive them or their parents, and so that's really been my focus, quite frankly, all over the world. I have been watching the Muslim Uyghur situation for quite some time, as it's been a bit more unusual in that so many commodities are addressed in our supply chain. And by that, I mean, we know, for example, tomatoes are grown there, and a company like Heinz Ketchup, purchases from suppliers there. We know there's a fair amount of apparel, cotton. It's one of the largest cotton growing regions in China. About 85% of the cotton in China comes from that region. So you've got companies that are being attacked, or brought out in the media, such as H&M and Adidas and Gap and Nike and many different companies, and they're having to address whether or not they cut and run, which is what we call it, or they stay and try and change policy. And we all know that that's a difficult thing in China. I mean, even when we've gone to the State Department and tried to change policy, I've been doing it for many, many years, and sometimes successfully and sometimes not. And it has a lot to do with the politics and their willingness to approach certain topics and address these things. And then finally, also electronics are being built there as well. And so recently, Apple was attacked for one of the camera that's in our iPhone comes from a supplier who has workers coming from the Muslim detention centers. So we're all well aware of the fact that, their freedoms are being taken away, they're being curtailed. I mean, auditors are being sent in. We know that those auditors are not usually, um, let's just say that we can't necessarily trust them, you know, because, and it's not because that as individuals are not trustworthy and that they're not reporting accurately what they're seeing. It's just that they themselves don't get provided the access that they should have. The workers are afraid to talk to them. They are afraid to say something that would put them in harm's way with the government and or be detained themselves. And so this has made for a really challenging and difficult way. And I am not a fan of companies cutting in, is what we call it. And there are many non-governmental organizations that will say that as well. They'll say, look, if just remove yourself. So Apple saying that they're, found that this may be connected to this camera company. And so they're looking at moving out. And H&M has also said they're moving out. And so that is a firm, and a stance one can take. And if one believes that they can have absolutely no effect, then that ultimately probably has to be the action one takes. But from my perspective, I would prefer that the companies all come together, irregardless of which commodities they're representing, and say, look, we represent this much of the supply, we represent this much of the income, and together we feel this policy has to change. These people need to be able to practice their religious freedoms. These people need to be able to go back to their home. These people need to have free movement. These people cannot work in hours and for pay like this. And so all of these things have to get addressed. And I deal with these issues in the Congo, Democratic Republic of the Congo, with coltan, in Uzbekistan, with cotton in Brazil, I mean, in so many countries, we are attempting to address tremendous exploitative practices that don't just enslave people and individuals and largely women, but children as well, all over the world. And I see it as kind of the last bastion of 21st century colonialism, where many of the people in the companies uh, don't want to see people who buy all of these commodities, people who buy the cell phone, they don't want to know that, this is the way it's getting made. They don't want to know that there's a 3-year-old child in the Congo who's getting poisoned by the coltan, or an 8-year-old who's carrying bags of coltan or cobalt on his back. You know, it's a hard thing to know, and it's people like me and my colleagues and friends who spend a lot of time getting in front of these executives and making sure that they are paying attention to the fact that this is how they're making money, and this is how we're making commodities.